Hi, awesome fifth graders. I'm so excited to be reading The Wednesday Wars by Gary D. Schmidt to you today. I'm currently at my dining room table recording this on my laptop, and this is the first YouTube video I've ever made, recorded, edited, all that stuff, so cut me a little slack, okay? I'm going to do my best, I promise. But last week, when we read on Thursday, we left off on quite a few important things. So first off, it is still May, and Holling's sister ran away to California in the yellow VW bug with Chit. All the way from New York to California is what her plan was. Holling's dad also bought a Ford Mustang because Meryl Lee's dad got the Yankee Stadium renovation job, and Holling's dad's starting to feel a little insecure about his position in the community. Holling is reading Hamlet for Mrs. Baker, and he is finding it very boring, and he thought it was a good idea to tell Mrs. Baker that. Well, Mrs. Baker told him he's going to reread it again, and he's not going to skip any parts this time. They are also still practicing atomic bomb drills at Camillo Junior High, and Holling tells us that they have not missed a single day of practice, and one of those practices fell on a Wednesday, when it was just Holling and Mrs. Baker in the classroom. Now, the two of them were doing the drill, and then Mrs. Baker declared that this was ridiculous, and she marched down to the office, got permission, and then took Holling on a field trip to view points of architectural interest in New York, where they were living on Long Island. And Holling saw so many wonderful things, and Mrs. Baker taught him a lot about the history of where they live. Alright guys, so like I told you, it is Wednesday, and Holling is just getting back from his field trip with Mrs. Baker. That afternoon, when I came back home, the station wagon was gone, the Mustang was gone, and the whole house was empty. Even the mailbox was empty, except for a flyer from my sister from the Robert Kennedy campaign announcing that he would be stopping on Long Island before the New York primary. My sister would have flipped. And I realized that the biggest part of the empty in the house was my sister being gone. Maybe the first time that you know you really care about something is when you think about it not being there. And you really know, that the emptiness is as much inside you as outside you. For it so falls out that what we have we prize not to the worth whilst we enjoy it, but being lacked and lost, why, then we rack the value. Then we find the virtue that possession would not show us while it is ours. That's when I knew for the first time that I really did love my sister, but I didn't know if I wanted more for her to come back or for her to find whatever it was that she was trying to find. See, this is the kind of stuff you start to think about when you're reading Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. You just can't help being kind of melancholy, even though if you had to play him on stage at the Festival Theater, at least you'd be a prince and wearing a black cape instead of being a fairy and wearing yellow tights. And that's why when my sister called that night, long after my mother and father had gone to bed, when she knew that I would be the only one awake to pick up the phone, I started to cry right away. And she did too. Both of us not saying anything, just crying into the telephone. What jerks. Somewhere in between all the crying, I heard that she was in Minneapolis, which I guess is on the way to California, that she was alone, that she had exactly $4 left in her pocket, that she didn't know what she was going to do since a bus ticket to New York City cost $44.55, that I couldn't ever tell Dad or Mom that she called because she couldn't bear to hear what they would say to her, and she was not sure if they would even say anything to her. And what was she going to do now? I guess she hadn't found herself. Where are you? I asked. Steve decided to join us for our read aloud today. He's in my lap. All right, where was I? Oh no, now we have two guests. I'll show you the other guest, Odin. Both my guests. All right, back to reading. Where are you? I asked. In the bus station. How else do you think I'd know that a ticket to New York City costs $44.55, Holling? Is there a Western Union window there? Of course there's a Western Union window here. All bus stations have a Western Union window. She paused a moment. I guess she was looking around. Holling? Yes, I said. I don't see a Western Union window here. The operator told us that we were almost out of time and we should deposit 35 cents for another 3 minutes. I don't have any more coins, yelled my sister. Get to the nearest Western Union station tomorrow, I said quickly. And then the phone went dead. All because of stupid 35 cents in coins. Like Bell Telephone was going to go bankrupt because one call from Minneapolis to Long Island in the middle of the night. I didn't know if my sister had heard what I'd said at the end, but the next morning I was waiting outside the Commerce Bank on, I'm not kidding here, Commerce Street, when it opened at 10 a.m. This may not sound like a big deal, but if you knew that Commerce Street was only a block away from Lee Avenue, and that I'd been hiding from eyes that would wonder why I wasn't in Camillo Junior High for the last hour, you'd be impressed. I handed my $100 Salisbury Park savings bond to the teller. Aren't you supposed to be in school? She said. I'm a little worried that an atomic bomb might drop on it, I said. Probably the school will make it through the day, she said. What do you want to do with this bond? I need to turn it in for cash. She looked at the date. If you turn it in for cash now, you'll only get $52. But if you hold on to it, in just a few years, it will be worth $100. I don't have a few years, I said. Because of the atomic bomb? She asked. No, I said. She turned the savings bond over and looked at it again. Do your parents know you're cashing this in? She asked. Yes, I said. I know. You don't have to tell me. I was lying. The teller fingered the savings bond. All right, she said finally. $52. I hope you're going to do something worthwhile with the money. I nodded, and she counted the bills out onto the counter. Further down on Commerce Street was the Western Union. I put the money up on the counter. I need to send all this cash to Minneapolis, I said. It's going for a visit, is it? Said the Western Union man. This was worse than a teacher joke. This was even worse than a nurse joke. I need to send it to my sister. The Western Union man counted it out. That's a lot of money, he said. Where are you sending it exactly? To the Western Union closest to the Minneapolis bus station. He said. He pulled out a directory and thumbed through it. It took about half an hour before he found Minneapolis. Well, he said slowly, taking his glasses off, looks like they've got 2 bus stations. There's the one on Heather Avenue, and then there's the one on LaSalle. Heather Avenue, I said. Send it to the one on Heather Avenue. The Western Union man put his glasses back on. It'll cost you $1.75, he said. Fine, I said. And what's the name of the recipient? I told him, and he took the money and sent $50.25 to Minneapolis, Minnesota, to a Western Union station on Heather Avenue, even though I didn't even know if my sister was at that station or if she even knew that the money was actually coming. I thought of her sitting alone in a place where everyone else was going somewhere, or wandering the streets of Minneapolis looking for a way to come home to a place that was emptier without her. Sort of like Hamlet, who, more than anything, needed to find a home, because he sure couldn't find himself. I spent the afternoon hiding around town, which is not easy since this isn't that big of a town. It would take a whole lot less than an atomic bomb to make it disappear. And since anyone who saw me might tell the Chamber of Commerce businessman of 1967, or Mrs. Baker, and if either of them heard, well, please just put me under a bomb. I waited for a call from my sister that night, but it didn't come until late Friday night from Chicago on the way. On Saturday morning, I told my parents at breakfast that my sister would be at the Port Authority in New York at 10:50 that morning. They looked at me like I had just chanted Hebrew. She'll be in the Port Authority at 10:50? Repeated my mother. Her hand was up to her mouth, and her eyes suddenly filled with tears. Yes, I said. How is she going to get home from there? Asked my father. Well, I said, I guess she was hoping you would go and pick her up. Of course, said my father. Of course, I'll drop everything and pick her up. Of course, I have nothing else to do. He stood up. If she went out in the yellow bug, she can come home in the yellow bug. She's alone, I said. You're not going to see me driving all the way into the city on a Saturday. She can take the train. She might be out of money, I said. Well, whose problem is that? He said. It doesn't matter whose problem it is. She can't get back home unless you go get her, I said. He looked at me. Who do you think you're talking to exactly? He asked. She needs help, I said. Then you go get her, Holling. The car keys are on my dresser. And he laughed. Okay, I said. Okay, he said, and went outside to start up the lawnmower. I went upstairs and I got the car keys, the Ford Mustang car keys, not the station wagon. Holling, said my mother when I came back down, I think he was being sarcastic. I went to the front closet and found my jacket. Holling, what are you doing? She asked. I held up the car keys. I'm driving into New York City to pick up my sister from the Port Authority bus terminal at 10:50. You don't know how to drive. I've seen movies, I said. I went to the front door. Holling, said my mother. I turned around. You can't drive in by yourself, she said. Then come with me, I said. She looked out to the backyard. We can't do that either, she said, and her voice was as sad and as lost as loneliness. I went out to the garage and sat in the Mustang. The red leather still smelled new. The steering wheel felt right in my hands. It wasn't like I'd never driven before. My mother had let me drive the station wagon around parking lots, the big ones down on Jones Beach, where you can go for 2 or 3 miles before you hit anything more dangerous than a seagull. I'd gotten out of first gear plenty of times, and even up into third gear twice. And the Mustang was smaller and handier than the station wagon. I probably just had to think about turning and the car would feel it. But driving around Jones Beach parking lots is a whole lot different from driving on the Long Island Expressway into New York City. And even if I could get on the expressway, I wouldn't know how to get off. Toads, beetles, bats. I came back inside. I threw the keys on the kitchen counter. My mother was putting out a cigarette and starting to make pound cake for lunch. Outside, the mower fussed at the edges of the lawn. I went into the living room and sat down on the couch. And Marilee called because her father was going to Yankee Stadium. And would I like to come? Can I get to the Port Authority from Yankee Stadium? I said. Marilee asked her father. It's too far, but he says that if you can leave right now, we'll have just enough time to drop you off. She was quiet a moment. I think he might feel like he owes you something, she said. I went into the kitchen. I need money for 2 train tickets, I told her. Train tickets? My mother asked. And money for 2 lunches, I said. She stared at me. Big lunches, I said. She went upstairs for her pocketbook. And that's where we're going to stop for today. Now, we have about 30 pages left in the Wednesday Wars. I want you to talk to your family, talk to your siblings, talk to whoever, your cat, your dog, about what's happened in the book so far, and what do you think is going to happen in the end? How do you think it's going to end? Are we going to get a cliffhanger? Is Holling going to get his sister and bring her home? Is his sister going to say, I don't want to go home? What's going to happen? I want to hear from you guys in the comments if you can comment, or have your parents email me or message me on Class Dojo, okay? All right, stay tuned for more.